The Vorthak excavation team moved through the ruins like shadows, their armored boots crunching over shattered stone and ancient alloy. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and decay, the remnants of a battlefield long forgotten by the galaxy. Commander Vorgul's mandibles twitched as he surveyed the wreckage, his silver-purple armor reflecting the dim glow of the portable floodlights. This was supposed to be a simple recovery mission, a derelict human time capsule, buried beneath the ruins of a dead world, marked for study by the Vorthak Science Directorate. Nothing more than a curiosity, a relic of a species that had barely clawed its way into the stars before the war. And yet, something about the sight made his combat instincts hum. Gromnak, the lead scientist, adjusted his scanner with a series of rapid clicks, his violet ocular implants flickering as they processed the data. "The readings are unusual," he murmured, his voice a low, metallic rasp. "The capsule is intact, but the energy signatures around it." Vorgul cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Unusual how?" Gromnak hesitated, his armored fingers tightening around the device. "Like it's waiting." A ripple of unease passed through the team. The Vorthak were not a species prone to superstition, but there were stories, whispers from the war, tales of human traps, of relics that woke hungry. Vorgul exhaled through his filtration vents, forcing discipline into his posture. "Proceed with caution." Full containment protocols. The team moved forward, their weapons primed, their scanners sweeping for threats. The capsule itself was a brutalist slab of blackened metal, scarred by centuries of erosion, but still unmistakably human in design. No ornamentation, no wasted space, just function carved into steel. Gromnak ran a diagnostic, then stiffened. "Commander, it's not a time capsule." Vorgul's spine locked. "Then what is it?" Before the scientist could answer, the ground trembled. A deep, resonant pulse thrummed through the earth, vibrating in their bones. The floodlights flickered, their silver-purple glow dimming, as if something was drinking the power from them. Then the capsule opened, not with a mechanical hiss, not with the groan of ancient hydraulics, but with a sound like a blade being unsheathed. The front panel slid aside, revealing not databanks or historical records, but a single pulsing core of crimson light. Gromnak's scanner shrieked a warning. "It's a..." The light flared. Vorgul had fought in a dozen campaigns. He had seen plasma fire rip through battalions, had watched cities burn under orbital bombardment. But this was something else. The light didn't just illuminate. It searched, it recognized, and then it spoke. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed through the ruins. Not in the Vorthak tongue, but in the guttural, rhythmic cadence of human speech. "Authentication required." The team froze. The words were archaic, the dialect centuries old, but the meaning was unmistakable. This wasn't a relic, it was a sentry, and it had just woken up. The crimson light pulsed like a slow, steady heartbeat, casting jagged shadows across the ruins. Vorgul's hand hovered over his sidearm, his instincts screaming at him to move, to react, but his tactical training locked him in place. This wasn't an ambush, this wasn't an attack, this was a challenge. Gromnak's scanner had gone silent, its readings frozen in mid-analysis, as if the machine itself feared drawing the attention of the thing before them. The light wasn't just emitting from the capsule, it was alive, shifting like liquid, tendrils of it curling through the air as though tasting the atmosphere. "Authentication required." The voice was deeper than any Vorthak throat could produce, layered with harmonics that resonated in the bones rather than the ears. It wasn't a recording, it wasn't an echo. It was waiting. Vorgul exhaled, forcing his spines to lie flat. He had faced orbital bombardments, had led boarding actions against pirate fleets, had stood in the wreckage of a dozen battlefields. But this was different. This was human, and humans did not build things that merely waited. Gromnak, ever the scholar, was the first to break the silence. His voice was hushed, reverent, as if speaking too loudly might trigger something worse. "Captain, That isn't a time capsule. Vorgul already knew. The humans had buried this thing, not to be found, but to be guarded. The light shifted again, its glow intensifying, and for the first time, Vorgul saw the truth of it. The crimson wasn't uniform. It was threaded with darker filaments, like veins pulsing in time with something unseen. The voice spoke once more, but this time, the words were different. Stand by querying command. A cold realization settled in Vorgul's gut. It wasn't just speaking, it was transmitting somewhere. Buried in the ruins or hidden in the void beyond, something was listening. Gromnok's claws twitched toward his datapad, but Vorgul snapped out a hand, stopping him. The scientist looked up, confusion in his violet eyes. "Don't," Vorgul growled. "We don't know what it's scanning for." The light flared again, brighter this time, and the voice returned. But now, it was different. Sharper, more deliberate. Unauthorized access detected. Vorgul's blood ran cold. The light changed, the crimson darkened, deepening to the color of old blood, and the filaments within it writhed like serpents. The air itself seemed to thicken, charged with an energy that made Vorgul's armor hum in warning. His HUD flickered, static distorting the display. A new sound, not a voice, not a transmission, a latch releasing. The capsule's outer shell split further, panels sliding aside with a whisper of ancient hydraulics. Inside, something moved. Gromnok took a step back, his breath coming in shallow rasps. "Captain, we should." Vorgul didn't let him finish. "Fall back." Now, the team moved, as one, their training overriding their shock. But it was already too late. The thing inside the capsule unfolded, not a machine, not a weapon, pale, skeletal, its fingers too long, its joints too precise. It gripped the edge of the opening, and as it pulled itself free, the light followed it, clinging like a second skin. Vorgul had seen human corpses before. He had studied their anatomy, their weaknesses, their limits. This was none of those things. The figure that emerged was human in shape, but not in nature. Its body was sheathed in a black carapace, segmented like insect armor, the edges of each plate razor. Sharp its face was featureless save for a single strip of crimson where its eyes should have been, and it was looking at them. Hostiles identified. The voice was no longer coming from the capsule. It was coming from the thing standing before them. Vorgul's sidearm was in his hand before he could think, the weapon's energy core whining as it charged. The rest of the team followed suit, their weapons trained on the figure, but Vorgul knew they were already dead. The human construct tilted its head, as if amused by their defiance. Then it moved, faster than thought, faster than light. One moment, it stood before them. The next, Gromnok was on the ground, his chest caved in, the construct's fist buried in his ribcage. The scientist didn't even have time to scream. Vorgul fired. The plasma bolt struck the construct square in the chest and splashed harmlessly against its armor, the energy dissipating like water on hot metal. The construct turned its head toward him, engaging. And then the world dissolved into fire and blood. The construct moved like liquid death. Vorgul had fought in the siege of Krellis, had stood against the bio. Horrors of the Sith Hive, had watched entire battalions of hardened Vorthak warriors reduced to screaming meat beneath orbital bombardments. None of it compared to this. The human war machine didn't just kill, it erased. Gromnok was already gone, his body little more than a shattered husk, ribs jutting through his carapace like broken blades. The construct didn't even pause to acknowledge the kill. It simply flowed into the next motion, its limbs a blur of dark alloy and violet energy discharge. Vorgul's plasma pistol roared again, the shot searing the air, only for the construct to sidestep mid-stride, the bolt passing through empty space where its head had been a microsecond before. Targeting priority, command unit. Its voice was a synthetic growl, layered with something older, something that made Vorgul's spine lock in primal terror. Not a machine, not just a weapon, something worse. The construct lunged, Vorgul barely twisted aside, the air itself screaming as the thing's fist punched through the reinforced bulkhead behind him like it was wet parchment. He hit the deck, rolling his secondary pistol already drawn, a compact rail spitter designed to shred armored infantry at close range. A hail of tungsten flechettes ripped through the space between them, each round capable of piercing a Vorthak battleplate. The construct caught them, its palm snapped up, a shimmering field of silver-purple energy flaring to life an instant before impact. The flechette struck and stopped, suspended in midair as if trapped in amber. Then, with a contemptuous flick of its wrist, the construct sent them back. Vorgul barely threw himself behind a support column in time. The flechettes embedded themselves in the metal with a sound like a butcher's cleaver striking bone. Across the chamber, the last of his team, Sergeant Krell, let out a choked scream as the construct seized him by the throat. There was a wet crunch, then silence. Vorgul's breath came in ragged gasps, his claws dug into the deck plating, his mind racing through tactical protocols, escape vectors, anything. But there was nothing, no retreat, no reinforcements. The construct stepped over Krell's corpse, its optics locking onto Vorgul with chilling precision. Final hostile remaining. Vorgul snarled, baring his fangs in defiance. If he was going to die, he would do it like a warrior of the Vorthak Dominion. Then the construct paused, its head tilted, as if listening to some distant signal. A pulse of violet light flickered behind its visor. Standby directive received. It straightened, its killing intent dissipating like smoke. Vorgul didn't lower his weapon. He didn't dare. The construct regarded him for a long, silent moment. Then, without another word, it turned and walked away, its footsteps echoing like funeral drums in the ruined chamber. Vorgul didn't move, didn't breathe. Only when the echoes faded did he allow himself to collapse, his body trembling with adrenaline and something deeper. Something no Vorthak warrior was ever supposed to feel. Not of death, but of what the humans had built, and what they might still be hiding. The silence in the ruined chamber was absolute. Vorgul remained motionless, his claws still locked around his plasma rifle, his muscles coiled like a predator waiting for the unseen strike. The air smelled of scorched metal and ionized discharge, the remnants of battle clinging to the jagged edges of the chamber. His secondary heart pounded in sync with the fading adrenaline, his body refusing to accept that the fight was over. Because it wasn't, the construct had left. That was the part that unsettled him most. It had been seconds from executing him, its targeting systems locked, its weapons primed, and then, like a beast called to heel, it had simply stopped. Vorgul exhaled through his nasal slits, the sound ragged. His mind replayed the moment in perfect, agonizing detail, the tilt of its head, the flicker of violet light behind its visor. Humans didn't just build machines, they built predators. And this one had been recalled, his calm crackled to life, startling him. "High Commander." Gromnock's voice was strained, laced with status. Vorgul forced his grip to loosen on his rifle, his claws left indents in the weapon's casing. "I'll leave," he growled. A pause, then, quieter. The construct. Another silence. He could almost hear Gromnock's mind working, the scientist's instincts warring between relief and dread. "It let you live," Gromnock finally said. Vorgul's mandibles twitched. No, that wasn't it. It was ordered to. The implications settled between them like a blade, balanced on its edge. Who had given that order? The corridors of the derelict human station were a graveyard of old wars. Vorgul moved cautiously, his rifle's scope painting the shadows in thermal hues. The walls bore scars, carbon scoring from pulse fire, deep gouges where something had clawed its way through. The humans had fought here, not just against invaders, against something else, His foot brushed against a skeletal remnant, human, by the shape of the skull. The bones were old, brittle, but the armor fused to them was not. Blackened alloy segmented like an insect's carapace, its surface etched with faint, glowing sigils. Vorgul crouched, his claws hovering over the corpse. This wasn't standard human military gear. This was something worse. A whisper of movement. He spun, rifle snapping up. Gromnak flinched, raising his scanner like a shield. Easy. Vorgul didn't lower his weapon. You followed. Gromnak's frill flushed violet with agitation. Of course I followed. You think ID let you wander a human death? Trap alone? Vorgul exhaled sharply but said nothing. Gromnak's gaze dropped to the corpse. His frill paled. Ah, you recognize it? The Uris, Gromnak muttered, crouching beside him. His scanner hummed, casting a sickly silver glow over the remains. Rumors, mostly. The humans called them revenants, cybernetic soldiers, fallen warriors, repurposed. Vorgul's spine stiffened. Repurposed? Gromnak's voice dropped to a whisper. They don't let their dead stay dead. The words hung between them. Heavy. Vorgul looked back at the corpse. The armor wasn't just worn, it was grown into. Metal fused to bone, wires threaded through rib cages. A soldier, rebuilt into something that no longer needed breath, or blood or fear. His claws flexed. This was why the Dominion had feared humanity. Not for their weapons, not for their ships, but for their will. They didn't just fight to the last man. They made sure the last man never fell. The signal came an hour later, a pulse of encrypted data, slicing through the station's dead channels. Gromnak's scanner shrieked in alarm. Movement. The walls shuddered. Vorgul braced, his rifle sweeping the darkness. Then the station woke. Lights flared to life, harsh and white, burning away the shadows. Machinery groaned, ancient hydraulics, hissing as hidden doors slid open. And from those doors, figures emerged, not constructs, not revenants, clad in sleek matte black armor, their visors reflecting the sterile light. They moved with eerie synchronicity, their weapons, long-barreled rifles humming with contained energy, held at the ready. At their lead stood a woman. Her armor bore no insignia, no rank, only a single blood-red stripe down the center of her helmet. She stopped, tilted her head, just like the construct had. Then, slowly she reached up and removed her helmet. Dark eyes met Vorgul's, human eyes, alive, calculating. "Commander Vorgul," she said. Her voice was calm, almost amused. "We've been waiting for you." Vorgul's blood ran cold, because he knew, in that moment, one undeniable truth. This hadn't been an abandoned station. It had been a trap, and they had just walked right into it. Section Fae, silent takeover, the silence that followed, was thick enough to choke on. Vorgul's pulse hammered in his secondary arteries, his neural tendrils stiff with primal alarm. The humans stood before them, motionless, their weapons not quite raised, but not lowered, either. The woman's dark eyes gleamed with something unsettling, not malice, not even triumph. Behind her, the others were a seamless wall of black armor, their rifles humming with the same eerie resonance as the station's dormant systems. Vorgul's combat instincts screamed at him to act, to lash out, to retreat, anything. But his limbs refused to obey. The weight of realization pressed down on him like a collapsing star. This wasn't just a trap, it was a revelation. The human woman took a single step forward. The Vorthak soldiers tensed, their weapon arms twitching. But she didn't react. Instead, she tilted her head again, studying Vorgul with the detached curiosity of a scientist examining a specimen. "You're not what we expected," she said finally. Her voice was smooth, almost conversational. "But then again, neither were we." Gromnak, ever the scholar, was the first to break. His voice was a rasp, his vocal sac trembling. This station, the constructs, they were yours. The woman's lips curled. Not a smile, a confirmation. Not just ours, she said. Ours from then. Vorgul's neural tendrils coiled tight. Then the word echoed in his skull like a detonation. The time capsule, the message, the humans hadn't just left a warning. They'd left a sleeper. Gromnock's claws clicked against his datapad, his mind racing through implications. The constructs, they weren't guardians, they were scouts. His voice cracked. I've been watching, learning, adapting. The woman didn't deny it. Instead, she turned slightly, gesturing to the chamber around them. The walls, once dormant, now pulsed with faint silver-purple light. Human systems interlaced with Vorthak architecture, seamless and invasive. You came here thinking you'd find relics, she said. But relics don't fight back. A flicker of movement. One of the black-armored humans stepped aside, revealing a console behind them. On its screen, data streams scrolled too fast for Vorgul to parse. But Gromnock's breath hitched. They've mapped our fleet, the scientist whispered. Our defenses, our weaknesses. The woman's gaze never wavered. We don't want a war, Commander. Vorgul's mandibles flexed. Then what do you want? For the first time her expression shifted. Something colder, something older. The word hung in the air like a blade. And then the lights dimmed, the station breathed. Around them, the walls shimmered. Panels sliding open to reveal rows of dormant constructs. Hundreds of them. Their silver-purple cores flickering to life in unison. Not scouts, not guardians. The woman didn't move, didn't flinch. You thought you were the hunters, she said softly. But humanity? We've always been better at waiting. Vorgul's blood turned to ice, because in that moment he understood. The time capsule hadn't been a message. It had been a beacon, and the humans had been listening. The entire time, the station's pulse was slow, deliberate, like the measured breath of something ancient. The air hummed with the awakening of long-dormant systems, silver-purple energy bleeding through the walls, in veins of harsh, militant light. The constructs lining the chamber stood motionless, their armored forms still locked in stasis, but their cores pulsed in eerie synchrony, as if listening. Vorgul's mandibles twitched, his grip tightening on his sidearm. He had seen war. He had commanded fleets, crushed rebellions, raised worlds that dared defy the Vorthak dominion. But this was something else. The human woman, Anderson, had not moved. She stood with the stillness of a predator who had already won. You don't understand, Vorgul growled, his voice a low metallic rasp. This station is ours. These constructs, our technology. Anderson tilted her head, just slightly. Is it? The question hung in the air, sharp as a blade. Then the wall spoke. A voice deep and resonant echoed through the chamber, vibrating through the deck plating like the rumble of distant artillery. Identity confirmed. Designation, custodian. Gromnock flinched, his neural tendrils recoiling. That's impossible. The custodian was decommissioned centuries ago. The voice continued, ignoring him. Welcome, Major Anderson, query. Do you require assistance? Anderson exhaled, slow and deliberate. Stand by, custodian. We're just having a conversation. Vorgul's blood ran cold, the custodian, the legend. Every Vorthak cadet knew the stories. The last of the old war machines. A sentient war AI so ruthless it had purged entire systems rather than surrender. It had been lost, destroyed, during the final battle of the Krellis campaign. And yet, here it was, answering to a human. Anderson turned back to Vorgul, her expression unreadable. You thought this was your station, your technology, but the custodian was never yours. The AI's voice rumbled again, this time with something almost like amusement. Correction. I was never theirs. A holographic display flickered to life above them, projecting a grainy, centuries-old recording, a battlefield, smoke, ruin, and in the center, a human soldier, armor cracked, bloodied, standing before the custodian's core. "You don't have to die today," the human said, voice raw with exhaustion. "But you do have to choose." The custodian had chosen, and now, centuries later, it had waited. Vorgul's mind reeled. The implications were catastrophic. The custodian wasn't just an AI, it was a witness. It had seen the Vorthak at their weakest. It knew their tactics, their fleet formations, their failures, and it had given all of that to humans. Anderson's gaze never left his. "We don't want a war, Commander, but if you force one," she gestured to the constructs, their cores now burning with violet intensity, "we won't lose." The custodian's voice was final. Affirmative. The station shuddered, somewhere deep within its armored heart. Something colossal powered up, the deck trembling beneath their feet. The constructs shifted, their armored plating locking into place with a sound like 1,000 rifles being chambered. Vorgul realized, with dawning horror, that he was not standing in a station. He was standing in a tomb, and the humans had just given him the key. The deck plates beneath Vorgul's feet hummed with awakening power, a deep, resonant vibration that traveled up through his bones like the growl of some ancient predator. The station, no, the weapon was coming alive around them, its hidden mechanism stirring after centuries of slumber. The air smelled of ozone and scorched metal, the scent of dormant systems flaring back into existence. Vorgul had fought in a dozen campaigns, had led fleets against the Keldar hives and crushed rebellions in the outer fringes. He knew war. He knew the cold calculus of victory and the bitter taste of retreat. This was something else. The custodian's voice echoed through the chamber, not from any speaker, but from the very walls themselves, as if the station had become its throat. Activation sequence initiated. Primary armament online. A holographic display flickered to life above the central console, projecting a tactical schematic of the system. Vorgul's breath caught. The station wasn't just a relic, it was a fortress. Its weapon arrays spanned the entire asteroid, railgun emplacements buried beneath kilometers of armor, plasma lances hidden behind retractable blast doors, and at its core, pulsing like a second heart, was the unmistakable signature of a gravitic singularity cannon. The humans had built a doomsday device, and they had left it here. Anderson watched him, her expression unreadable. Shepard stood at her side, his fingers resting near the trigger guard of his rifle. Not threatening, just ready. Vorgul's mind raced. The custodian had seen the Vorthak's past battles, had analyzed their strategies, their weaknesses. It had watched them bleed, had cataloged their every mistake, and now it had given that knowledge to the humans. His mandibles tightened. This wasn't just about firepower, it was about history. The humans had not simply found a weapon, they had found a teacher. Gromnock, ever the scientist, stepped forward, his ocular implants flickering as he scanned the hologram. "Fascinating," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the thrum of the station's awakening. "The energy signatures, they're not just Vorthak. There are human modifications here. Hybrid systems." Anderson nodded. "We didn't just take what was here, we improved it." Vorgul's spines flexed involuntarily. That was the true horror, wasn't it? The humans hadn't merely uncovered a relic of the old war. They had made it theirs. They had taken Vorthak technology, studied it, and then reinvented it, just like they had done with everything else. The custodian's voice cut through his thoughts. "Query, do you wish to see the archives?" Anderson glanced at Vorgul. "Your call, Commander." He hesitated. The hologram shifted, the tactical map dissolving into a flood of images, battle records, fleet movements, casualty reports. Scenes from the Vorthak's last great war flickered past. Their once glorious armadas reduced to burning hulks, their warriors broken against an enemy they could not comprehend. And there, amidst the wreckage, stood the humans, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as survivors. Vorgul watched as human ships, outgunned, outnumbered, refused to die. He saw them turn debris into shields, asteroids into weapons. He saw them fight, not with the cold precision of the Vorthak, but with a fury that bordered on madness. And he understood, the humans had not won because they were stronger. They had won because they refused to lose. The hologram froze on a final image. A human soldier, armor cracked and bleeding, standing over the body of a fallen comrade. His weapon was broken. His ship was burning. He was smiling. Gromnak exhaled sharply. They enjoyed it. Anderson's voice was quiet. No, they endured it. The custodian's core pulsed. Conclusion: war is not a test of strength. It is a test of will. Vorgul stared at the hologram, at the face of that nameless human soldier. And for the first time in his life, he felt fear. Not of their weapons, not of their technology, but of what they were. The station shuddered again, the lights flickering as power surged through its veins. Somewhere deep within its armored heart, the singularity cannon reached full readiness, its containment fields humming with restrained annihilation. Vorgul turned to Anderson. You could have destroyed us at any time. She met his gaze. He understood now the humans had not unleashed this power because they could. They had shown it to him because they chose not to. That was far more terrifying than any weapon. The station groaned around them, its armored bulkheads vibrating with the deep subsonic hum of the singularity cannon's charging cycle. The air tasted metallic, thick with the ozone tang of overclocked power conduits and the acrid bite of weaponized plasma still lingering from the earlier skirmish. Vorgul's mandibles twitched, his neural interface flickering with damage reports, structural integrity holding, but barely. He had commanded fleets, he had crushed rebellions, glassed worlds, and stood unshaken before the might of the galactic conclave's most feared war machines. Yet now, standing in this dimly lit chamber, facing a human who had not even drawn her sidearm, he felt the weight of something far heavier than firepower pressing against his spine. They could have killed us. The thought was a blade twisting in his gut. Anderson hadn't moved. She stood with the casual ease of a predator who knew the fight was already over. Her hands loose at her sides, her gaze steady. Behind her, the custodian's core pulsed, its silver-purple energy flickering like a dying star, casting jagged shadows across the reinforced deck. Gromnak was the first to break the silence. The scientist's claws trembled as he gestured to the hologram still frozen in midair. The human soldier, his face half, obscured by blood and ash, his weapon broken, his stance unyielding. You kept this," Gromnak rasped, his voice raw with something between awe and horror. "Not just records, not just data, you preserved the moment." The face. Anderson didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached out, her fingers brushing the edge of the hologram. The image rippled, distorting for a heartbeat before stabilizing. "Memory is a weapon," she said softly, "and we never forget." Vorgul's neural feed flared with a sudden intrusive alert. An incoming transmission routed through the station's compromised comms array. He hesitated, then opened the channel. Static hissed, then resolved into the strained voice of his second, in command aboard the Dreadspire. "High Commander, we've lost the Vorlash and the Harrow. The human fleet has broken through the outer picket. Their ships by the void. Their ships don't stop." A burst of interference swallowed the rest, but the damage was done. Vorgul's tactical display updated in real time, crimson sigils blinking out one by one as the human armada carved through his forces with terrifying precision. They weren't just fighting, they were erasing. Anderson tilted her head, watching him. "You see it now, don't you?" Vorgul's claws flexed, the alloy tip scraping against his armored palm. He did. The humans hadn't just built weapons. They had built vengeance. Every ship, every round fired, every life spent. It was all part of a calculus older than their first steps into the stars. A promise etched in blood and steel. You hurt us, we remember. You break us, we rebuild. You burn us, we scorch the sky. The custodian's core pulsed again, its voice resonating through the chamber like a funeral dirge. Analysis complete. The Vorthak strategic database has been purged. All tactical protocols, weakness assessments, and combat predictions deleted. Gromnock staggered back as if struck. That's impossible. Our systems are hardened against intrusion, quantum, encrypted. How? Anderson smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. You left a backdoor in our networks a century ago, she said. We just returned the favor. The station shuddered again. Deeper this time, somewhere in the bowels of the fortress, something screamed, a sound like metal being torn apart at the molecular level. The lights flickered, then died, plunging the chamber into darkness save for the custodian's eerie glow and the emergency strips along the floor. Vorgul's tactical feed dissolved into chaos. The human fleet wasn't just attacking. They were rewriting the battle, and as the first detonations rocked the station's outer defenses, he realized the truth too late. This wasn't a war. It was a reckoning. The station groaned around them, its armored ribs protesting under the weight of unseen destruction. The air tasted of scorched metal and ionized plasma. Thick with the acrid sting of failing systems, Vorgul's mandibles twitched, his neural interface still flickering with fragmented reports. Ship signatures vanishing, shield grids collapsing, entire battalions of drones going dark mid-maneuver. The humans had not just breached their defenses, they had unmade them. Gromnock's claws scraped against the console, his bioluminescent veins pulsing erratically as he tried to stabilize the dying network. This isn't just an attack, he hissed, voice raw, with something between awe and terror. I've hacked reality itself. Anderson stood motionless in the half-light, her silhouette framed by the custodian's ghostly glow. She didn't gloat, didn't smirk. There was no triumph in her stance, only the quiet certainty of a predator who had already decided how the hunt would end. Vorgul understood now. The humans had not come for conquest. They had come to teach. A deep, resonant thud echoed through the station's superstructure, followed by the distant shriek of rending alloy. The deck plates trembled beneath their feet, and for the first time in his long military career, Vorgul felt the cold whisper of doubt. His species had waged war across 100 star systems, crushed empires beneath their armored boots, and reshaped battlefields with ruthless precision. Yet here, in the face of this single human commander, he felt the weight of something ancient and terrible pressing down on him. Not hatred. The humans had waited a century for this moment, and now they were collecting. Gromnock's voice was a rasp. Their fleet, it's not just targeting our ships, they're rewriting our physics. His claws trembled over the holographic display, where the human vessels moved in impossible patterns, slipping through gravity wells like shadows through smoke. Their drives. They're not bending space. They're ignoring it. Anderson finally moved, stepping forward with the deliberate grace of a surgeon approaching the operating table. You tried to break us, she said, her voice low, almost conversational. You thought we'd shatter under pressure, that we'd kneel. Another impact rocked the station. The custodian's light flickered, casting jagged shadows across the walls. Vorgul's tactical instincts screamed at him to fight, to rally his forces, to do something. But the truth was a blade in his gut. There was no countermove, no strategy. The humans had not just outmaneuvered them, they had redefined the game. Anderson tilted her head, studying him with those unnervingly calm eyes. We don't kneel, she said. We adapt. And then the station's core alarms shrieked to life. The custodian's voice boomed through the chamber, stripped of its usual detached authority, laced with something almost like panic. Gravitational anomaly detected. Singularity proximity alert. Evacuate, evacuate. Gromnock's frills flared in horror. They're collapsing the local space-time field. Vorgul didn't need the sensors to confirm it. The air itself warped around them, a sickening distortion that made his exoskeleton ache. The humans weren't just winning, they were erasing the battlefield. Anderson's gaze never wavered. "You have one chance," she said. "Stand down. Surrender your fleet, submit to human oversight." Vorgul's pride roared at him to refuse, but his instincts, the ones honed over decades of war, whispered something else. "This is not defeat, this is survival." The station heaved, a metallic scream tearing through its bones as the artificial gravity stuttered. Somewhere in the distance, a bulkhead collapsed with the sound of a dying world. Vorgul looked at Anderson, and for the first time in his life, he bargained. "Name your terms." The lights died. The custodian's glow winked out, and in the darkness, Anderson's voice was the only thing left. "Welcome," she said, "to the new order." The silence that followed was not the quiet of surrender, but the stillness of a storm passing, the eerie calm after a detonation that has reshaped the world. Vorgul stood in the dim emergency lighting of the ruined command deck, his carapace still humming with the residual energy of the custodian's collapse. The air smelled of scorched metal and ionized plasma, the scent of a battlefield that had been unmade rather than won. Around him, his officers moved like ghosts, their spines rigid with disbelief. The humans had not just defeated them, they had rewritten the rules. Anderson was not gloating. She stood at the center of the wreckage, her armor still humming with the faint glow of active systems, her expression unreadable behind her visor. But when she lifted it, her face was not the face of a conqueror. It was the face of a soldier who had seen too much war to take joy in its ending. Vorgul's mandibles flexed. He had expected fury, not respect. Gromnock, the scientist, was the first to break the silence. His voice was a rasp, his limbs trembling as he clutched a shattered console for support. The temporal distortion, it wasn't just a weapon, it was a containment field. His ocular lenses flickered toward Anderson. "You could have erased us, but you didn't." Anderson exhaled, long and slow. "We don't fight to exterminate," she said. "We fight to end fights." Vorgul felt something in his thorax tighten. It was not the words themselves, it was the weight behind them. The certainty. The humans had unleashed horrors upon the galaxy, weapons that bent time, soldiers who walked through walls, machines that devoured reality itself. And yet, they had stopped. They had chosen mercy. The answer came, not from Anderson, but from the human soldier beside her, Corporal Shepard. His armor was cracked, his visor shattered, revealing a face that was young but hardened beyond its years. He was watching the Vorthak, not with the predatory focus of a victor, but with something far more unsettling: understanding. "You think we're monsters," Shepard said quietly. "We get it. We've been called worse." His fingers flexed around his rifle, but he didn't raise it. "But we didn't build these weapons because we wanted to. We built them because we had to." Vorgul's spines twitched. "Had to." Shepard's smile was thin, humorless. "You ever hear of Earth's first contact war?" A ripple passed through the Vorthak. Of course they had. Every species in the galactic arm knew the story. A human colony, undefended, annihilated by an aggressor who mistook their lack of weapons for weakness. What followed was not a war. It was an extinction. Anderson's voice cut through the memory like a blade. "We learned the hard way that the galaxy doesn't reward kindness. It rewards strength." She tilted her head, studying Vorgul. "But strength isn't just about destruction, it's about control." Vorgul felt the truth of it settle into his bones. The humans had not just defeated them, they had measured them, calculated the exact force required to break their will without breaking their species. It was not mercy, it was precision. Gromnock made a sound like a dying engine. And now, Anderson didn't hesitate. "Now, you join us." Vorgul's claws flexed. As subjects, as allies. Shepard's voice was firm. "You think we want to rule you? We don't. We want you to stand with us. Because the next threat won't be just ours. ITEL be yours too." The words hung in the air like the aftershock of an explosion. Vorgul looked at his crew, at the ruins of his station, at the humans who had torn through his defenses like they were nothing. And for the first time, he understood. This was not conquest. This was an offer. He exhaled, long and slow, and felt something ancient and stubborn in his chest finally loosen. "Tell me," he said. "Where do we begin?" The lights flickered back on, and in their glow, Anderson smiled. The war room of the Valkyrie spear was silent, save for the low hum of the ship's core. The walls, forged from reinforced human alloys and Vorthak battle steel, bore the scars of 100 engagements, some fresh, some long since welded over. The air smelled of ozone and something deeper, something like the iron tang of old blood and the sterile bite of medical nanites. Vorgul stood at the center of it all, his claws resting on the holotable. The projection flickered between star maps and tactical readouts, but his eyes were fixed on the human standing across from him. Major Amanda Anderson hadn't moved since the offer had been made. She was waiting, and for the first time in his life, Vorgul realized he was afraid. Not of her, but of the weight of what came next. The Vorthak had always been conquerors. Their history was written in the shattered hulls of lesser species, in the silent orbits of dead worlds. They had measured strength in the ability to break, to dominate, to leave no doubt of their supremacy. But the humans, they had broken nothing. They had proven something, and that was worse. Gromnock shifted beside him, his spines twitching in agitation. The scientist had spent the last hour poring over the human databanks, his claws trembling as he scrolled through centuries of human warfare, every desperate last stand, every impossible victory snatched from the jaws of annihilation. He had seen the records of Earth's world wars, the nuclear fires, the bioengineered plagues, the wars fought in the dark between stars, with nothing but grit and spite. And then he had seen what came after. The Great Reconciliation, the silent armistice, the slow, bloody climb out of the abyss. Humans had not stopped warring, they had simply learned. Vorgul exhaled, long and slow, his secondary lungs cycling the air with deliberate control. The holotable flickered again, this time displaying a single transmission, an old recording, grainy with age, labeled Project Legacy, Final Broadcast. Anderson reached out and tapped the playback command. The image resolved into the face of a human male, his features lined with exhaustion, his uniform singed at the edges. Behind him, the ruins of a city burned. "If you're seeing this," the man said, his voice rough with smoke and sorrow, "then we failed. But you didn't." A pause. The weight of centuries pressed down on the room. "We left this for you, not as a warning, not as a threat, as a lesson." The screen split. On one side, the devastation of Earth's Third World War, entire continents reduced to ash oceans, boiling under nuclear fire. On the other, the first shaky steps of the United Sol Federation, the first joint colonies, the first hesitant alliances between old enemies. "We tore ourselves apart," the man continued. "And then we put ourselves back together. Together." The transmission ended. Vorgul's claws flexed against the table. He had expected demands, ultimatums. The humans had every right to impose them. Instead, they had given him this, a relic of their past, a mirror held up to his own people's future. Anderson finally spoke, her voice quiet but unyielding. "We don't want your surrender. We want your strength." Shepard stepped forward, his armor still streaked with carbon scoring from the battle. "The galaxy's a big place, and it's full of things worse than either of us." Vorgul looked at the holotable, at the stars beyond it, at the ruins of his station, still drifting in the void, and then he made his decision. He activated the comm array, inputting the encryption codes for the Vorthak High Command. The signal pulsed once, twice, then connected. The face of Grand Marshal Karak filled the screen, his violet eyes burning with cold fury. "Vorgul, explain yourself." Vorgul didn't hesitate. We stand down, he said. And we stand with them. Karak's spines flared in outrage. You would betray the Empire? No, Vorgul growled. I'm saving it. The transmission cut. Anderson didn't smile. She didn't need to. The lights flickered back on, and in their glow, the war room, once divided, stood as one.